Okay, an interesting conversation to have here, Zach Berman, because people aren't really talking about the possibility of the Eagles using an early round pick on a wide receiver. You've got A.J. Brown locked up. You've got DeVonta Smith locked up. Do you really need another guy? Jahan Dotson had a really good Super Bowl. But this is an important position for the Eagles. They want the offense to be great. Do you think it's realistic to think they could use an early pick on a receiver?
I think it's realistic that they can use an early pick on Luther Burden, not necessarily a receiver. I make that distinction because this is one where Howie Roseman would go up on the podium afterwards and he would say he was the best player there.
Gotta trust the board.
He'd trust the board. He was the best player there. The whole point of the draft is to try to acquire good players. Don't focus so much on position. Don't focus so much on need, as Joe Douglas learned from Ozzie Newsome that today's luxury is tomorrow's necessity, and you just never know how your roster is going to shape out if you get good players, and Luther Burden's a good player. So I don't think the Eagles will say we want to get a wide receiver, an offensive skill player in the first round or second round. I think it's more if this is a player that's on the board, it's hard to ignore that value.
All right, well, let's find out a little bit more about the prospect himself. Fran Duffy breaks down not Luther Burden Jr. No, Luther Burden III.
All right, time to talk about one of my favorite receivers in this draft, and that's Luther Burden from the University of Missouri. He's going to be a 21-year-old rookie, a true junior coming out of college. Was extremely productive as a sophomore in 2023. That production nearly cut in half this season as a junior. That's one of the big red flags with Luther Burden. But let's talk about the skill set. He lined up primarily in the slot. He is a movement player. You want to move him around the formation. They certainly did that, protected him from jams. He didn't face a ton of press coverage in college. But when you look at the skill set, he's quick, he's explosive, he's a dynamo with the ball in his hands, one of the more explosive, electric playmakers in this class. And he's a threat to take it to the house anytime he touches the football on offense or even as a return man. He's done a little bit of kick return and punt return during his time with the Mizzou Tigers. So when you're looking at Burden, he's a certain type of receiver, but we've seen this type go high in the draft. Jalen Waddle was a name that I wrote down while watching him. Brandon Cooks was a name that I wrote down while watching him. I also wrote down former Eagles first-round pick Jalen Reagor. So we've got varying levels of success here when you're talking about a player like Luther Burden. But when I watch him, one of the more impressive yards after catch players that I've studied at the receiver spot in the last couple of drafts. He's excellent with the ball in his hands, but he's not just an underneath guy. He also flashes great ability down the field to be able to finish and make plays over the shoulder in the vertical passing game. And also, when I watched him in 2023, some really good moments over the middle, exposing his body to punishment and taking hits, making catches through contact. Wasn't just like a finesse space player, but showed that ability to get those dirty yards and make those plays in traffic that you're going to have to do as a slot receiver in the NFL. He can still get a little bit better as a blocker. He can still get a little bit better as a route runner. Good flashes in both areas. Like to see him get a little bit better in both, though, moving to the league. Ultimately, this is a guy who didn't put the ball on the ground often. He's got, I mentioned the qualities after the catch, the inside-outside ability. To me, looks like he would be a dynamic number 2 receiver or potentially a solid number 1, depending on the skill set there. Remember, I wrote down some of these guys, Jalen Waddle, Brandon Cooks, they both profiled as that similar type of skill set coming out of college. Now it's just a matter of landing spot and fit. With where he's being talked about going, which is late round 1, early round 2, there are some teams where he could come in and be a wide receiver 3. That would be a great kind of situation here for Luther Burden. To me, again, one of the more dynamic players in this class. Now, where does he go? It's going to be fun to watch, but this guy's got a ton of ability.
You know, Zach, a lot of people say that I don't like to throw to a third wide receiver. I just funnel my targets to A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith and maybe Dallas Goedert. But if I got Luther Burden the third, maybe that would change.
Well, Jalen, it's great to see you. I've been looking forward to speaking to you this summer.
What are you talking about? We talk all the time. You and I are thick as thieves, my man. The lamp is always full when it's you and me.
Yeah, so what I would say to Jalen and about Jalen is that...
Say it to my face.
If a guy's open, you're going to throw him the ball. And Luther Burden,
that's right.
And Luther Burden the third will get open because that's what he did at Missouri. He was as highly touted a recruit as there was coming out. Stayed close to home by going to Missouri and has been really productive when he's there. So if Jalen Hurts looks, if you take a step back and you see A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith and the attention that's going to them, man, Luther Burden's going to be open because he'll run his way open. He's that type of player.
Now, you know the locker room almost as well as I do. And I don't think that AJ and DeVonta would have a problem with adding a first-round wide receiver to the team, but what do you think?
I think they've already been paid. So, no, I don't think they'd have a problem with that. I do think, though, that you would have to pass the ball more than you did.
Music to my ears, baby.
Yeah.
Straight jacket off.
Yeah, Jalen, you can tell Kevin Patullo and Nick Sirianni that you don't want your line to be, 12 of 19 for 130 yards if you take Luther Burden in the first round.
I want my arm to be sore, baby. I want to throw that rock.
Well, that's what you would do, because the way I would see it is that you're losing the Dallas Goedert role in the offense this season. You like Jahan Dotson, but what you're doing is you're adding an offensive playmaker. And I think sometimes we in the media and people who watch football focus a lot on, does he play this position? Does he play that position? Sometimes just look at it like you have 5 skill guys on the field. And if your 5 skill guys are better than the defense, then you can make plays.
The offense is going to look like I want it to look like. And I want Lubu. Lubu 3. LB 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Luther.
Jalen, what's your evaluation of Luther Burden?
He's fast. He can run.
Yeah.
I want to give him the ball.
Actually, so the player he reminds me of is a player.
Jalen, where'd you go?
The player that he reminds me of is a player. I just want to make sure this isn't a comp that's used elsewhere. Is a player that we both liked coming out of Alabama, who Jalen knows well, and that's Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Jeudy was really productive this past year with the Browns. But you're not looking at someone who's like, 6'3", 210 pounds. He's not Ted McMillan there. You're not looking at someone who's running like a 4.2 40. What you're looking at is someone who's just a really good wide receiver. Gets open, gets yards after the catch, makes tough catches. I like Luther Burden a lot.
Now, I have one sort of statistical red flag on Luther Burden that concerns me a little bit. Top 40 wide receivers over the past decade plus, the guys who have been to the Pro Bowl or first team All-Pro, all of them, their college yards per catch. Luther Burden's 11.8 would be the second worst of that entire group, just ahead of Antonio Brown, who's the only one, and he played in the MAC. Luther Burden, if he's this explosive guy, he's running a 4.41, he's a dynamic wide receiver, why isn't he making more big plays?
Down the field, you mean? Yeah, I think some of that might be a function of the Missouri offense, but it's a fair question, and it's a fair question too when you look at some of the other wide receivers in this draft who might be more explosive in terms of the statistical production.
Okay, so do you think the Eagles? I know you said at the beginning of the video, if it's Luther Burden, Howie would be interested in. Do you think it's a realistic possibility?
I'm not expecting it to happen that way. Now, the one thing I'll say is that if Luther Burden is there at 32, presumably there are players that we're talking about the Eagles taking who are off the board, right? Maybe there's a run on edge rushers. Maybe there's a run on D-line.
Let's say your choices are Luther Burden, Shamar Stewart, and Ariante Ursary.
Yeah, I think they'd be more apt to take Shamar Stewart there.
Okay.
In that case, maybe Ursary. If that really depends on their evaluation of Ursary, but I think if you're looking at the edge rusher who's tooled up, who can play multiple spots, or you're looking at a productive wide receiver, I think they'd be more apt to take the edge rusher who's tooled up.
All right. Well, you can check out much more of Fran Duffy's analysis on allphly.com. You get the full Die Hard draft guide. Like the video. Comment below. Let us know. Would you draft a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds if you were Howie Roseman? And check us out on allphly.com and on the PHLY YouTube channel.